Hello, 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 ladies and gentlemen. This is Moai speaking. I am doing this video as a sort of means to get my feet wet, try some ideas, do kind of a test run of quality, so to speak, using this setup. And so if you guys like this video, you like the format, please, tell me, leave any feedback you have in the comments. This is going to be kind of an off-the-cuff, I wouldn't say rant, not quite that extreme. More of just commentary, if you will. Mainly want to talk about Zaws. Zaws are probably one of my favorite mechanics in the game. I don't know if you'd call it a mechanic. But primarily because Zaws, I think, have been and still are some of the best melees in the game, and I don't think they're going anywhere anytime soon. And I'd kind of like to divulge why that is. As the video title states, I own well over 50 Zaws. The footage that you're seeing in the background is actually using one of those Zaws. That is a Dockrum Zaw. It is a heavy blade using melee influence build. I will throw that up on the screen now for those of you who are curious. This build is not, using any external help. You can see I have Warframe on this Inaro setup, but I elected not to use it for the sake of video purposes, even though I have it on for comfort. I just want to show that, this Zaw is more than capable of carrying a DPS by itself, in a mod survival. But more to the point, I really enjoy Zaws primarily because of their flexibility and customization options. One of, I think, the most important aspects is that as Melee has been in kind of a constant flux state over the many years of Warframe, we've had, the Melee balance as of recent, then we got Melee Arcanes, then even before that, then they got rid of channeling, changed the combo counter, so on and so forth. Melee's always undergoing, constant major revisions because it's kind of this arms race between guns and Melee to see, oh, well, guns are way stronger than Melee now, so now we need to buff Melee. Oh, Melee's way stronger than guns, so now we need to buff guns, and it's been this kind of constant back and forth between the two categories of kind of keeping a nice balance between them both. Right now, I think it is mostly leaning towards guns, because, there's a lot of guns out there. All the Incarnons are fantastic. You have Torrent, obviously. Latron is a personal favorite of mine. But when it comes to melees, I think one of the problems right now is that Melee is almost entirely carried by, Melee influence and, some of the other Melee arcanes here and there. Melee exposure sees some use. But I want to go on a limit and say that Zaws actually don't have this problem. They are not beholden to influence at all, because Zaws are infinitely customizable. I own 50 because over the years I have just made Zaws again and again, trying different builds, trying different things, seeing what works, what doesn't, and oh, so this test build from 2 years ago suddenly now has a purpose because it's the perfect setup for this new arcane that came out, or a build that might be kind of evergreen, like a standard crit build that you can use for a lot of things. Afflictions is really, really good. I think a lot of people don't give Afflictions the credit it's due. There's a lot of heavy attacks that Zaws have categories for. I think it's daggers, Nikanas maybe? It's daggers, Nikanas for sure. Scythes also have this property, where on a heavy attack they will both knock down and inflict a force slash proc, and Afflictions will give you basically 6 times whatever that force slash was. So you combine that with other things, you're doing very crazy upfront damage, and especially at a wide range. Rivens for Zaws as well. Rivens for Zaws are very, very, very cheap. I think the only one that still really holds value is going to be the Plague Zaws. Again, especially the Crit Path. The Crit Path has always been in a fantastic melee. It has stood the test of time, namely due to its innate high rolls, just giving it a huge advantage over most melees in the game. However, I'd like to talk about more of the applications for, a broader user base, mainly new players. I think that Zaws are actually a fantastic investment for new players for a couple of reasons. One is that a lot of the early game melees, I feel you get access to, again, outside of, I would say, the Zaws. Obviously, the Zaws is a fantastic melee that you are given via a quest, but even then, you're not always given all the tools you need to make that viable early on. Zaws, on the other hand, are available as soon as you touch ground on Cetus. There's no reason not to go to Cetus. I think, in fact, you're forced to in new player experience. I haven't, been a new player for quite some time, so I'm not quite sure how they do that nowadays. But Zaws also, introduce you to the faction system and, standing and planet resources from the open worlds. I think it's a great way to dip your feet into those and figure out, like, what all these systems do and how they work, because it's a great incentive. Zaws are going to be a fantastic melee that can carry you through most of the game, especially if you build it right. I think that the base parts that they give you right at the start are pretty serviceable. I don't want to say they're good. I don't think you get any of the decent links until you are rank 3 with the Ostrons. But by then you unlock most of the decent parts for Zaws. But even then, you can kind of start working on them as soon as you can. Namely because, again, like, you don't really get access to many crazy melees into your progression. I mean, there's a couple you can get here and there. I mean, you can probably invest in the regular Nakana, that will be fine. I mean, you do get the Skiajati from the Sacrifice, that is something you get as well. But I think that if you invest in a Zaw and you plan early, you have something that you're constantly working on and building towards while you're doing your other progression. That will eventually pay off as an endgame weapon that you can start working on as early as Earth. As soon as you, get into the star chart, you can kind of start working on a Zaw, like once you enter Cetus and whatnot. So I think that in and of itself has a lot of value towards new players, introducing that to new systems. So I would highly recommend it. If you're a new player, you're just starting out, or even, midway through the game, you're at Neptune, Jupiter, maybe almost to Pluto, I would go back to Earth and I would start making a Zaw. I think that it is very, very worth it. There's a lot of builds out there. If you guys want individual build guides, leave it in the comments below. I can make an entire video detailing a whole bunch of different various builds, what ranks you can get them at, what they're good for, what you spec into, all that sort of stuff. I can create an entire video for that, so again, leave feedback below. That is what's going to help me as a creator more than anything, more than subscribing, likes, views, what have you. Secondarily to that, I mentioned earlier that Rivens are very, very, very cheap for Zaws. And I think that is to its great benefit, because Zaws can almost be built in a top-down fashion where you start with the Riven, you roll for stats, you find something that looks good, and then you build the Zaw around it. You get the parts, you match it up to, whatever your Riven stats are, and you build the Zaw based on the Riven you have, instead of trying to roll for specific stats for the Zaw that you have made. And I think that in and of itself has a lot of intrinsic value, and it makes Zaw Rivens much less intrinsically painful than other Rivens would be, because you're not beholden to, like, oh, I need to roll crit, so on and so forth. No, you can roll for just whatever you get that happens to look good, like, oh, spin the wheel, I got status and range and an elemental. Okay, now I can build, a condition overload melee influence out of that. Like, I don't need to roll that anymore. That Riven's already fine, You have quote-unquote perfect stats because you're building a melee for those stats. And I think that is one of the reasons why, even if you don't like Rivens, if you don't invest in them, I would get a Zaw Riven, I would roll that a couple times, get some good stats, and then go build a Zaw out of that Riven. I also think it's a very fun experience. It's a very different way to build something in Warframe that I don't think you get a lot of, and I think it's a cool experience to do so. That everyone should maybe try at least once. And again, you're rewarded with a very, very strong melee outfit. You know, it's almost like fate. The blade chooses you, so to speak. Some goofy speech like that. But generally speaking, again, I recommend Zaws to every single person who plays new and old. If you haven't invested in it, if you haven't taken the time to invest in Zaws, I would do so, because there are always going to be, evergreen melees that are going to survive. Patches, you can combine them with other things. They have their own arcanes as well. Exodia Hunt is a fantastic one. You see me using it in the video right here. It is that green slam effect that you see. You'll see it a couple times, probably coming up here. But that, is essentially a range increase. It works really, really well on heavy blades because the quote-unquote ground slam in Exodia Hunt is very liberal in what it considers a ground slam. It basically means anytime your weapon touches the floor during the melee combo, like your weapon is hitting the floor. Like I said, you can see that, side spin that you do in the main Temple Royale combo, that's 1-2. That's 2 times where it has a chance to proc, and that's why it's so good on heavy blades. There is Exodia Brave. Exodia Brave is a great one. That is great for energy economy if you build a heavy attack setup. So, if you have a frame, that might struggle with energy a little bit. Okay, now you have a weapon for every frame that, can help with your energy economy. And that is an amazing investment to have. It's kind of like the Grimoire book that you have. Or, again, Exodia Contagion is obviously the very famous one. It's a big projectile that's got a lot of weird idiosyncrasies to it, but is a fantastic damage option nonetheless. I know it's used in a lot of high-end, late game, end game content, and I'm sure you know that. But I think that is all I have to say about it. I will see you all next time. Again, leave feedback down below. Tell me if you like this sort of format. And peace out.